Are you looking to become a leader in clean energy and an expert in clean tech? Do you hope to get noticed in the crowd as you pursue a career in this fastly growing industry? You are in the right place. Join Karan Takhar as he invites clean energy leaders to share industry developments, highlight clean tech investment opportunities, and shed light on how you can increase your chances of employment in this high-growth sector. We will also discuss the energy transition across key emerging markets like India and explore partnership opportunities for the U.S. private and public sector. After all, this is the Zenergy Podcast.
Hi, Tony. Thank you so much for taking the time. As I was just mentioning to you before turning on the recorder, I'm super inspired by your career journey, where you've been in leadership positions at several hugely impactful organizations, including the Ford Foundation, Habitat for Humanity, and now the Bezos Earth Fund. We're going to touch upon your career journey later in the interview, but it would be great to start for listeners who may be unfamiliar. Can you provide a brief background on the Bezos Earth Fund and what your role is in the company?
Certainly. First of all, thank you for the invite. This is very exciting to be on the podcast, and then I'm looking forward to have a great conversation with you. To start off with, regarding the Bezos Earth Fund, this was an organization, a fund that was created by a commitment of $10 billion, 10 with a B, billion with a B, from Jeff Bezos in 2020. And the focus of this is really to address climate and nature change within the current decade, what we call the decisive decade. So this is somewhat unique compared to other climate organizations where nature oftentimes is not part of the equation. So we do want to emphasize that we are focusing on both climate and nature for the current decade. And that's really the focus on the organization itself. In terms of how is this different? We're also a grant maker to begin with. We are obviously a donor, but we also want to do it differently compared to other organizations where we really want to support the direct implementations of the grants that we provided. So rather than just continue to provide funding, which is an absolutely fantastic thing, we're going to be working hopefully side by side with our partners on the ground on some of these major issues out there as well. In terms of my role, would be really, I'm the current Chief Financial and Operating Officer for the Earth Fund. I'm obviously in charge of the finance component and really all things operational, including things like grants management, as well as IT technology, facilities, and other operational matters. We are a startup organization, so for the last couple of years, it has been quite a journey for us to get to where we are. We have done quite a bit, and we're excited for the next few years to come.
Amazing. And on the website, it says, which some of this you mentioned, that the Earth Fund was created by a commitment of 10 billion with the B from Jeff Bezos in 2020 to be dispersed as grants to address climate and nature within the current decade, and that these funds would like to be distributed by 2030, which is a huge philanthropic endeavor with seemingly a lot of flexibility. So would love to hear about what the sourcing process for investment looks like and what are the key criteria that the fund looks for when thinking about which organizations to invest in.
That's a great question. Obviously, $10 billion, as we mentioned, is a lot of money out there. But at the same time, when you look at an issue like climate change, 10 billion is not a lot as well, depending on how you look at it. So we have to be strategic in terms of how we go about funding the commitments that we have out there. Obviously, we have 7 major programs that we're going to be focusing on. Among those program criteria, we also basically look at 2 kind of fundamental things that we want to target. One is the ease of implementation. Is this something that can be scalable and can be implemented realistically moving forward? That is one of the criteria. Second is whether these projects or grants can establishing a movement that really hope to create that tipping point that we're looking for to move things forward and more wider spread in terms of the climate issues. We are one of the largest, if not the largest, funders on climate at this moment. So we have a responsibility in terms of making sure that we can provide that tipping point for that movement that's required to address some of these really significant issues out there on climate.
Understood. And what does the actual evaluation process look like, or the due diligence process, when a company applies for a grant with the Bezos Earth Fund?
I think, generally speaking, we're very similar to a traditional foundations or a funder. We typically target nonprofits or 501c3 organizations. However, we are also providing some opportunities for the non-501c3 or not nonprofit organizations out there. We go through a criteria to make sure that these are eligible organizations, plus what I mentioned earlier regarding their funding criteria in terms of programmatic match, in terms of how aligned they are with our programmatic areas. Obviously, your general compliance in terms of grant making, those are part of our due diligence as a whole for organizations to work with us as well.
Got it. And if an organization did want to apply for a grant with the Bezos Earth Fund, what does that process look like from the organization standpoint? Do they generally need a warm introduction, or how does it usually work? And what advice would you have for organizations who are looking to get some funding?
Sure. I think, for one, I want to clarify that we are not an organization like many foundations. We're not an organization where we open up for open solicitations for applications or proposals. We carefully work the sector to talk with the various experts out there and identify the individuals or organizations that we need to be working with, and identify those sourcing needs. And then we will partner with them to develop the proposals that may be needed for these grants. That's really generally is our process. So if anyone's interested, really stay tuned on our website for regarding any updates and information regarding potential opportunities to partner with us. That's probably the best way to get involved with us. And obviously, we also have other event initiatives that's open to other populations as well.
Thank you for expanding on that.
Yeah.
And would like to highlight the 7 programs, which you did touch upon earlier, that the fund focuses in on, which are conserving and restoring nature, future of food, environmental justice, decarbonizing energy and industry, economics, finance and markets, and next technologies. There's so much good work happening within each of these programs. Would love to hear your perspective on, out of these, what has been the main focus of the fund till date, and which areas do you think will be getting more emphasis moving forward?
I think that's an excellent question. Also, I would say that it's not the easiest question to answer, to be quite honest. Given how young we are, there are obviously areas that we want to prioritize, because some will take more time for us to figure that out. In general, the nature side, while that might be, quote unquote, early on the easiest things to tackle because they are more tangible, and those are the things that we have done pretty well so far for the last 2 years. We have made a commitment of a $2 billion commitment focusing on conserving and protecting nature, as well as another $1 billion on future of food. Those are the things that we are very excited about because of those tangible commitments. The remaining dollars will still need to be prioritized in the climate area, which we're still, not only us as an organization, but the whole world is trying to figure out what is the right solutions. So that's going to take some time for us to talk with the experts, partner with the experts to figure out what are the right investments that we need to be making as well. In those areas, it could be anything dealing with system change. It could be dealing with energy. It could be dealing with green finance. You name it, there are probably more areas out there that require more funding than what we can provide. Therefore, we will need to prioritize what's most important. But in general, we have made some really good progress so far in terms of focusing on nature, but that's also not the easiest in terms of implementation. So we're going to require a lot of synergy with partners on the ground to help us out, local government sectors and communities to support that implementation as well, just like on the climate side.
Are there any specific projects within nature that you would like to highlight? Because I think it would be interesting and helpful for listeners to get a sense of some of the projects that
Absolutely.
invest in.
Absolutely. I think our nature project, particularly focusing on restoration, is a key component of what we do. We're working in South America and Brazil in general, particularly in terms of restoring the Amazon. And obviously, we're also in Africa, in the Congo Basin area, also working on restoration in that region as well. Unfortunately, there are more areas that needing resources than we can really provide. So we have to be really selective. Initially, those are the two important regions that we're focusing on, but we will be expanding to other parts of the world to be focusing on conserving the nature portfolio as well.
Very cool. Regarding climate justice, it's mentioned on the website that environmental harm has disproportionately hurt communities of color in the US. Can you talk a little bit about why it was important to include this program as part of the 7, and also how your grants are helping communities access Justice 40 funds, which was a major initiative put forward by the Biden administration last year?
That's right. And then this is very important to our portfolio as an organization. We all understand that the group that is impacted most likely negatively as well, the most would be the groups that are often underrepresented when it comes to climate change policies and programs. So we want to make sure that we are part of the solution in terms of changing that, to making sure that these communities are being represented and engaged when it comes to policy changes or program changes that's impacting their communities directly. So with our climate justice program, it is really focusing on just that. We have just last year rolled out a US program that's focusing on roughly about $400 million commitment. And that's really focusing on greening American cities. Some of the initial cities for that has been including Albuquerque, Chicago, Los Angeles, Wilmington, and then my hometown, Atlanta, as well. So the idea for these pilot cities is really to focusing on various initiatives, everything from greening their public spaces to kind of extreme weather-related impact that the community might be facing, to even food desert situations where a lot of the urban areas is also being impacted because of climate change. So those are some of the initiatives and ideas, and that's not all. What you have mentioned about the Justice 40 program is very important, because Justice 40 does have a climate focus initiative in that. And this is another way for us to support that and partner with these organizations so they can get access to the funding that's provided through Justice 40. And so far, we're very excited about the movement that we have created, and we're looking forward to working with more cities in the upcoming years.
That's amazing. And within each of those cities, are you partnering with various organizations according to which vertical within climate justice they focus in on?
Absolutely. So we have really partnered with some really grassroots organizations, local communities, to make sure that is being done. So it's not just focusing on some of the national organizations, but truly local organizations to make this happen. At the same time, we also have what we call a fellow, a person that's really managing and working with these different groups at the local level to ensure success and ensure that resources are being provided, and then that person can become that liaison with not only the local NGOs, but also local governments as well, whether it's with the mayor's office or other different government agencies locally as well. So it is a program that we are very excited about, and we're learning quite a bit, and we're also hopefully making some great adjustments moving forward as well.
Seems really exciting, and leads
Absolutely.
quite well into my next question,
Sure.
which zooms out a little bit to get a sense of why the Bezos Earth Fund specifically decided to focus on funding nonprofits. And as someone who has such phenomenal experience leading many of the most impactful nonprofits, would love to hear your perspective on why that focus was accounted for in the Earth Fund's initial days, and what advice you would give a climate-focused nonprofit looking to raise funding today.
That's a fantastic question. And if I may, I will borrow a quote from Margaret Mead. She had once said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed individuals can change the world. In fact, it is the only thing that it ever has." I think that's she's obviously brilliant in her own right, and what she said is exactly one of the reasons why we are partnering with nonprofits, because these are really some of the great minds out there, great institutions, but also very committed individuals trying to make changes to climate or to nature as a whole. That's, if anything, that kind of sums up your question about why we're partnering with nonprofits, because these are really people who knows the issues, who also potentially knows the solutions. The only thing that they may not have is resources. So if we kept be that help for them to provide the resources that might be needed to move that, again, to cause that movement, to move that needle, to make some changes, that's what we are here for. And again, these are communities, whether it's in small communities in the US to urban cities around the world. Those are critical components that we need to have that movement that we're looking for. And obviously, climate change is a very daunting challenge that we have as a human being. The only people that can really address it is us human beings. So what better way is to identify organizations that have that focus and can partner with us to drive these changes. So it will take some time, but I do think that these are people, it's not gonna, again, they're committed to the cause and committed to the solution. That's how changes can happen. And that's our goal.
That's powerful. And if you were to give some advice to a leader of a nonprofit, and maybe we could stratify this according to various sizes. For example, a leader of a relatively new nonprofit versus a leader of a very established nonprofit. Do you have any advice as it pertains to being able to raise funding?
Sorry about that. Okay. That's a bummer.
Were you able to hear my question, or should I repeat it?
You can repeat it but I know the question, but maybe the second part especially.
Okay, cool. We'll repeat it. So I was just asking, given all of the great work you've done in the nonprofit space, do you have any advice for a leader of a nonprofit stratified according to size? For example, advice to a leader of a relatively new nonprofit, and then separately, you could provide advice to a leader of a pretty established nonprofit as it pertains to raising funding.
Those are really great questions. In some way, I would say they're very similar in terms of my response. Whether you are a startup organization joining the nonprofit world for the first year of college or whatever, or someone who has been around, I think the answer is really make sure that you know your priorities and passion. I think understanding that will be important, whether it's as an individual or as an organization. And then let me break that down a little bit. For an organization, you got to know, basically doing your SWOT analysis, understand what your organization is good at and where their priorities are out there in terms of issues, particularly on climate. There's so many, unfortunately, there's so many issue areas out there. You have to stay focused, and there won't be anybody that can tackle climate issues all on their own. So you have to stay focused and really prioritize what you're good at and what you may not be good at. If you're not great at something, but you still need to do it, let's make sure how to figure out how you can get better at that. That's no different than an individual, a young professional or a veteran professional. If you don't love what you do, I would encourage you to take a step back to think about, is that really what you want to do for the remaining of your careers or for however long you want to do that? Figure that out and really figure out what you're good at, what you're passionate at. And again, if there's still something that you're passionate at, you're not very good at just yet, then figure out, is it more education? Is it more experience that can get you better? More networking opportunity, more experience? That's where I stand, and that's what I always believe in terms of looking back at my professional career or even my life in general. I think I'm very fortunate. I'm very grateful for my professional career, and I wouldn't change a thing. If anything, I want more of that. That's really my focus. So in terms of fundraising, I do think networking for any organization is going to be important. I do think that having that passion, if you believe in that cause, you will find a partner out there that understand that passion and understand the need for that cause. To make from that point on, is connecting the dots and making that resources available to your organization. So don't give up. Fundraising is not easy. It's not for everybody, but there are individuals out there that loves it and does it very well. If that's you, fantastic. Keep it up, and hopefully that you can also share the wealth, so to speak, in terms of helping others in the sectors to do that well as a whole.
Amazing. And as an extension of that answer,
yeah,
I'd love to hear if you have any piece of advice reflecting through the lens of your journey to your 25-year-old self and your 35-year-old self.
I think for my 25-year-old self, I would say that I would look at what I've done was great, but at the same time, I wish I'd done more now looking back. For both my 25-year-old and 35-year-old selves, I would definitely jump in earlier in terms of particularly some of the international opportunities nowadays that I was not as visible to those. I think I would encourage young adults to get into, the world is not flat in some way when you look at it. In some way it isn't, but we're much closer to non-US, more of a global citizens than ever before. Climate is an issue. It's not just a US issue. It's not just a Canada or China or Africa or whatever you want to call it issue. It's a global issue. So with that being said, we have a responsibility to make sure that we're part of the solution and not part of the problem. So if anything, I would say engage early in terms of from a global perspective. Don't be afraid to network, because you never know. Yes, you might get turned down once in a while, but you know what? There will be other opportunities out there. I know it can be very frustrating, get turned down, but don't give up. One, life is too short. The problem is too big for us to give up so early.
Thank you so much, Tony, for your time today and for all of this incredible inspirational advice. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's great talking with you. This has been a great conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Same here. Thank you so much. Sincerely.